Alright, so technically there are 3 videos that go with this lesson. However, I'm only going to make a video for one, which is extracting and using square roots. The other 2, solving quadratics by GCF and factoring, we will talk about those tomorrow in class. But realistically, we've been solving quadratics by using a GCF and factoring the entire first semester. So you have already practiced those a lot. There's no sense in me to make a video for you to watch that because we hope you have a pretty good handle on that, but we will review those tomorrow in class. Okay, so we're going to go to video 2 part, extracting square roots. The biggest thing to think about, first of all, when extracting square roots, it's very useful to have in a binomial, all right, 2 terms, one that has a squared term and one with a constant, all right, when we're extracting our square roots. It's very important that our next step is to isolate our squared term. We're going to isolate the square term, whether that square term is just an x squared or a binomial squared, like an x plus 1 quantity squared. Okay. After that, we want to take the square root of both sides, simplify our radical if possible, and then get our answer, I guess, right? For sure. So first off, here we go. Here's our first problem. X squared minus 32. So we said our first step was to isolate our square term. So to do that, I'm going to add 32 to both sides. So I'll have x squared equals 32. Next step, undo a squared. I have to take the square root of both sides. So then x would equal plus or minus root 32. However, from your algebra days, you know that you can simplify this radical. Now, you've probably been taught this many different ways. All right, I choose to show it by multiplying a perfect square. So what perfect square gives me 32? All right, other teachers in the past probably have done it differently. Okay, you may have seen a factor tree. I'm going to show this way, but whatever is best for you. 16, the square root of 16 is 4. There is no square root of 2, so I write root 2. Now, you may be able to skip this portion in red in your head, and that's totally fine. That's totally fine. That's totally your choice. You can go ahead and do that. But make sure you have the plus or minus. Do not forget the plus or minus when you are solving. All right. We're going to move straight down the line here and talk about x plus 5 equals 0. First term, first step, isolate my square root. X squared equals negative 5. Next step, take the square root of both sides. And some of you may have some alarms going off in your head like, wait a second. I can't take the square root of a negative number, but I think we're about to introduce something, or review something that you love. All right, when I take the square root of a negative, technically remember this is negative 1 times negative 5. Well, remember that the square root of negative 1 is I. So this technically becomes x equals plus or minus I radical 5. Well, this is not a real root. It is an imaginary root, though. Okay, we're going to talk a lot more about imaginary numbers in a couple of videos. But don't forget that the square root of negative 1, if I have a negative number, I can take my imaginary number out, I. All right. I'm going to go back to that first page, but I'm going to go here with this one. Move the face. So technically, what I could do here, all right, as I could do this. Now, you don't need to write that step. I could do this. Multiply x minus 5 out. Have a trinomial and try to factor it, okay? Or, since my square term is already isolated for me, I can take the square root of both sides right away. The square and the square root drop out. I just have x minus 5. Plus or minus root 30. Now 30 does not simplify, so I'm going to leave it as the square root of 30. There's not a perfect square that multiplies into root 30. So I'm going to add 5 to both sides and leave this as x equals 5 plus or minus the square root of 30. Just like that. Wow. Wow. Remember, when solving, all right, 5 plus or minus square root of root 30 is technically an x-intercept. Especially when solving here, x would equal plus or minus 4 root 2. That's an x-intercept. Right? We're solving for our x-intercepts, our roots. Another way of thinking of it are zeros, all meaning the same thing. Alright, in this one I need to isolate my square term, so I have 4x squared equals negative 81. I still don't have the squared, I have the square term by itself, however I have this 4 attached to it, so I have to divide by 4. Negative 81 over 4. Now square root both sides. Okay, remember when I take the square root of a fraction, that's the same thing as the square root of negative 81 over the square root of 4. So I'm really taking the square root of the top and the bottom separately. Well, the square root of 4 is 2. The square root of 81 is 9, but I have that negative, so it's 9i. Like that. So my answer should be plus or minus 9i over 2. Wow. Alright, that was a short video. Wow, only 6 minutes. Lucky you. Tomorrow we'll review factoring. Alright, we'll have you practice some of these in class. And then, yes, and then video 1 as well. That stuff too. Alright, see you later.